Okay. Of course, we could do, like, I literally could just read to you, like, the first chapter, because it's just, like, so perfectly relevant. Not even, like, the childhood home. Like, we can obviously skip that. I'm talking about, like, the first. Like I said, when I get the paper copy, I can highlight and stuff like that. And like I said, Hitler said too, like, it was so hard to, like, spiritually come to the realization of, like, what was going on, because of course you don't want to believe that, like, a single group of people is creating such havoc, and then doing it on purpose, and then not only doing it on purpose, but doing it, like, aggressively and maniacally on purpose, and having to, like, blame what seems like an entire group for a small part of their group's hugely malicious crimes against society and humanity. But it's like, it's somewhere you have to get when you look around and see that people are living in pain and suffering and poverty. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to hurt people's feelings, and also you look around and you see the tremendous amount of suffering. Like, what do you do? Like, you really have to, like, grapple with that. So and, like, you hear, like, I can't, I wish I could highlight this, but, like, in Germany, the elected members of the government failed to see any of this happening. It was like they were struck with blindness. The burdens laid upon the German people were enormous. They suffered unheard of sacrifices and taxes and blood. Anyone who was not blind could see that their sacrifice would be in vain. What hurt us most was the fact that these activities were shielded by the alliance with Germany. The gradual extermination of German qualities in the old monarchy was, to a certain extent, sanctioned by Germany itself, which is something that we see right here in the U.S. Like, they're demonizing the Constitution. That's, like, the extent that it's gotten to. The hypocrisy was evident when the Habsburg monarchy worked hard to give the outside world the impression that Austria was still a German state, and this only fanned the hatred of the monarchy into a blazing anger and contempt with Austria. In Germany, the elected members of the government failed to see any of this happening. It was like they were struck with blindness. They could have walked beside a corpse showing signs of decay and proclaimed that they had discovered signs of new life. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. Here he talks about just the inconsistency of labor, and then, like, kind of how like people were just kind of passed around and would go through like unemployment and become discouraged and then get a job, and then unions would come together again, which unions were something like the Jewish people had invented, and then they would go on strike and stop working, and then the people would not have jobs again. So it's like the indifference surrounds its victim with a mirage, which makes them see only a well-fed prosperity regardless of their true circumstance. Like we see that happening now. The mirage grows to such morbid intensity that they give up on their self-control the moment wages begin to flow into their pockets. That is why a man who has difficulty finding any work stupidly forgets to plan for bad times when he does find work, but instead lives greedily and indulges in the moment. His tiny weekly income is instantly spent because he does not plan for the remainder of the week. That's just kind of like a personal tidbit. And then it kind of talks about like how, people would become discouraged and they would argue in the home, and then men would go to alcohol, like just kind of like the social cycles. And he said, I was disgusted at first. I later came to realize the tragedy of the suffering and to understand its deeper causes. They were unhappy victims of evil circumstances. The housing conditions of those days were worse. The housing situation of the laborer was absolutely frightful. I shudder now when I think of those wretched caverns some lived in, of the houses where journeymen of the common trade lived together in a mass dormitories, which were sinister pictures of refuse, filled with disgusting filth and worse. And then he just goes to say, like, they were just crammed in these places, and then, like, you just couldn't get away from anybody. Like, and it created, like, unhealthy family lives because, like, if you got into a fight with your wife or your husband or something, like, you had nowhere to go get, like, a little space because you were just crammed together. And it says, like, it was no longer human beings who rose before me out of unhappiness and misery, out of squalor and physical degradation, but the sad products of sad laws. At this time, my own fight for life was no easier than theirs. Preserve me from becoming emotionally involved with the products of this ill society and allowed me to remain objective. No emotional sentiment will help understanding here. Even then, I saw the only twofold path could lead to improvement in such conditions. I experienced a deep feeling of social responsibility to establish a better system for our development. I knew it would require brutal determination to destroy this human outgrowth, which had no chance of being preserved and corrected. Nature does not focus on preserving what exists. Nature concentrates on breeding a new generation to perpetuate the species. It is almost impossible for a man to improve those bad things that exist in society, but it is much easier to create healthier parts from the start. I do feel like that's true. I do feel like there's a natural, like, evolution that, like, we're trying to go through that the status quo, like, does not want us to go through. And I feel like that's why there has been zero progress in the last absolutely 30 years, except for, like, just degeneracy. I realized that the task of improving social elements could never be a frivolous welfare scheme. They are ridiculous and useless. Instead, we must overcome the fundamental weaknesses in the organization of our economic and cultural life. The holes in the system are bound to lead to perversion of individuals. or at least they are capable of doing so, which you see now is like we have the system that we're paying toward that has been perverted by so many individuals and ruined, that now the very same individuals are trying to say that we no longer need them. And it's all them. It's all them. They are the ones that created it. They're the ones that perverted it. Then they're the ones that are saying it needs to go and that they should just keep the money. And what Hitler is saying here is that it's a whole problem. It's a frivolous scheme, and you see that we're paying taxes, and then we're paying insurance, and then we're paying out of pocket, and these individuals are just taking advantage of it. So wavering judgment is the enemy that will halt our advance when we need to use the most brutal weapons against a criminal group that is hostile to the state. This uncertainty results from a feeling of personal guilt and responsibility for a tragic decline of society. Uncertainty cripples any serious and firm resolve and results, in my opinion, swaying from one side to the other, leaving any decision that is made weak and half done, even when it comes to the most essential measures of self-preservation. Only when there comes an age not haunted by the shadow of its own guilt will there be both an inward calm and an outer strength, which can brutally and ruthlessly prune the dead limbs and uproot the weeds in our society's garden. Which is what I'm telling you. Like, you can't have wavering, guilt-ridden, kind of mind thought because they tell you like, oh, it's anti-Semitic to question these systems and who's doing this to us. You have to ruthlessly uproot it and confront it ruthlessly, because they're gonna keep fucking around with you. They're gonna keep telling you it's the Islams. They're gonna keep telling you it's the people who got through the border. Like, they're gonna keep blaming other people. Like, we don't have time for that. We have to ruthlessly look at them and say, no, it's you. It's you. You bomb their countries. You displace them. You open the border. You let them in. You blame them. It's you. I don't care what you say about me. It doesn't serve me to listen to you, who is trying to destroy me. So basically, I mean, this is just all like the same of what is happening to us today. Like, with us, there is both the sin of omission and a destruction of what little we were lucky enough to learn in school. What little we were lucky enough to learn in school. They don't want us in school. Like I showed you, the IQs. It's like Hong Kong, like China, Japan, Iran. We're like number 10. Like Germany's now number 13, because it's not fashionable in other countries like China and Iran to be uneducated. It's not fashionable to act dumb. That's what Zionists have tried to make our culture. It's not fashionable to not be educated. And trust me, Zionists, they're getting the best education. They're telling you you don't need it while they're getting the best education. They're making you spend 3 generations of your family's wealth on an education that you'll never be able to pay back and will put you in debt forever, because they don't want you to get the education. Then they're so desperate now, they want to give you AI, so you only know what they tell you should know. Same tactics, like it's all the exact same. So you should demand your education, and you should demand it at a price you can afford, and you've already paid for it for 30 years, so it should be given to you at a very quality level, because as Americans, that's what we've paid for. That's what our parents paid for. That's what our grandparents paid for. We didn't pay so Israelis and their billionaire puppets could have free education and have a million wars and kill millions of people. We paid so we could have education and quality lives. So the rats infecting our political system gnaw even at that tiny bit we have learned. Out of the hearts and memories of our people, poverty and wretchedness have also done their share to crush these memories. And like I said, when you're living in poverty, you're in survival. When you can't pay your bills, you're cutting out private tutoring for your kids. You're cutting out extracurricular activities. You're cutting out piano lessons. Your family's been paying 3 to 4 generations of taxes, and you cannot get your children ahead because you don't have the finances for no reason. You've worked, you've paid taxes, and yet you cannot do the things that you should be able to do here. They never utter a good word about humanity. No institution is safe from their profane attacks. From the school teacher to the head of state, no matter whether it is a religion or a moral state or society, everything is defamed and dragged into the muck. When the boy leaves school at age 14, it is hard for him to tell which is greater, his incredible stupidity where common knowledge and basic skills are concerned, or his biting disrespect and bad manners. Total Zionism. Like, just a disdain for humanity, a disdain for manners, like a disdain for like decent society. The immoral displays, even at that age, make one's hair stand on end. Like, you see how they raise those kids in Israel, like spitting, doing the middle finger, attacking Palestinians. He holds almost nothing sacred. He has never met true greatness, but he has experienced the abyss of everyday life. What position can he possibly occupy in the world which he is about to enter? The 3-year-old child has become a 15-year-old who despises all authority. Aside from the filth and uncleanliness, he has yet to find anything which might stir him to any high enthusiasm, which is kind of where like young men are right now with these tech stealing financial Zionists telling all these young people it's worthless for you to get a job, it's worthless for you to get an education, and then offering no information. They're just stealing like the spirits and the determination and the life goals of these kids. His fellow citizens are astonished at his lack of national enthusiasm. They see theater and movies, trashy literature, and yellow press day by day pouring out poison, like we see on X and Elon's page especially. Then they are not surprised at the low morality and the national indifference of the people. They do not realize trash movies, cheap journalism, and the like would never produce the skills needed to recognize the greatness of their nation and like of their potential and capacity. I finally realized something I had never even dreamed of before. The ability to nationalize a people is primarily a question of creating healthy social conditions that can be used to educate the individual. Only when upbringing and school training have taught a man the political greatness of his own nation will he achieve the inner pride that comes from belonging to such a great people. You can fight only for something you love. You can love only what you respect. You can respect only what you know. So, yeah, this is the evil. This is the evil here. The evil here telling you that we should have a decent society that is worthy of respect, so young adults can be enthusiastic about being part of their larger community, which is their nation. A person who has mastered the art of proper and true reading can read any book, magazine, or pamphlet and immediately spot everything he believes he needs to remember, either because it fits his purpose or because it is generally worth knowing. What he has learned when the task is proper placed in his imagination concerning the matter at hand, it can either correct or complete that image to increase its correctness or clarity in his mind. If life suddenly presents some question that requires examination or a solution, that memory stored through this reading method will instantly recall an already imagined picture as a standard and will bring out individual bits of information on the subject which have been retained through decades, and that will be the basis for the intelligence used to clarify or answer the question. Only then is there a sense of purpose in reading. So basically, like he was saying something about, I didn't read it just says that no man with this kind of mind can retrieve from his jumbled knowledge what is appropriate when he needs it. His intellect is not filled with his own life experiences, but is filled with what he has read in books in whatever order the content happened to land in his head. AI. And fate reminded him to correctly use what he has learned in his daily life. It would also have site volume and page, or the poor guy would never find what was needed. But since fate does not do this, these knowledgeable men are embarrassed when it really counts. They search their minds frantically for a proper comparisons and usually end up with the wrong idea. If this were not the case, then it would be impossible to understand the political achievements of our learned government heroes in high places unless we decided they are mischievous and not mentally disturbed. So it's basically just like he's talking about the mental programming. He cannot connect with the reasoning. His memory will fail him as he stammers to find someone else's words to repeat. He cannot connect to the reasoning he needs to enforce what he says or argue with his opponent. When the result is just a matter of personal ridicule as a speaker, this may not be fatal, but it becomes serious if fate places one of these incompetent know-it-alls in a high position such as head of state. Then this is serious indeed. Even at a young age, I was careful to read properly, and this skill has helped me tremendously by improving my memory and understanding. In this light, my time in Vienna is particularly fruitful and valuable. The experiences of daily life stimulated me constant study, being in a position to support reality with a theory and to test theory by reality. I was prevented from either suffocating in theories or growing superficial in how I judge reality. So now we get into his discovery of what was happening. So he says here, the activities of social democrats did not seem unattractive to me at the time. I thought it was also a good thing that they were trying to improve the living conditions of the working man. At that time, I was still innocent and stupid enough to believe this could happen. What did repel me was their hostile attitude toward the fight of the preservation of the Germanism and the pitiful wooing of the Slavic comrades who were willingly to accept the courtship and make any concessions. Otherwise, they maintained an arrogance and conceit which gave these insistent beggars their just rewards. Doesn't that sound exactly like what's happening now? They despise citizens, they despise America, they despise the Constitution, but they just cannot stop wooing their Slavic comrades, aka the Israelis. At the age of 17, I had become somewhat acquainted to the word Marxism, and I thought socialism and social democracy were identical ideas. Again, the hand of fate opened my eyes to this unprecedented fraud of the people. So isn't that what they do to you every day? Like Elon and these puppets, they talk about socialism and social democracy as identical ideals, and again, like, you grow up and you get your own opinion and you realize what they're talking about. So far, I had encountered the Social Democratic Party only as a spectator at a few mass demonstrations without gaining any insight of the mindset of the supporters or the nature of their doctrine. I learned something that otherwise may have taken years, an understanding of the disease masquerading as social virtue and the love of one's neighbor, a disease and humanity must free the earth from, or the earth would soon be freed of humanity. My first encounter with social democrats was on a construction job. So, like, their understanding of a disease masquerading as social virtue and love of one's neighbor. So it was a masquerade. So I realize the infamous intellectual terrorism of this movement targets the privileged class, which is neither morally nor spiritually unmatched for such attacks. They tell a barrage of lies and slanders against the individual adversary it considers most dangerous and keep it up until the nerves of the people attacked give in and they sacrifice the hatred figure just to have peace and quiet again. Like Iran, like, they just wouldn't stop beating us over the head, so they have to sacrifice the hated figure just to have peace and quiet again. But the fools still do not get peace and quiet. The game begins again, and it is repeated until the fear of the villain becomes a hypnotic paralysis. Same thing, like, since the Social Democrats know very well the value of their power from their own experience, their storming is directed mainly at those characters who have the same quality. Conversely, they praise every weakling on the other side cautiously, then loudly according to the intellectual qualities they see or suspect. They fear an impotent, weak-willed genius less than they fear a forceful nature with the modest intellect. An impotent, weak-willed genius, Elon Musk. Their highest recommendation goes to weaklings in both mind and nature. Every Zionist puppet you see is a complete weakling in both mind and nature. Hence, how they were blackmailed and how they do their bidding and how they are able to repeat the stupidest illogical concepts you've ever heard in your life that are also against themselves, that are against their own very survival. These they are successful in creating the impression that giving in is the only way to win peace and quiet and from them, while they quietly, cautiously, but unerringly conquer one position after another, either by quiet extortion or by actual theft. When the public attention is on other things, the public is distracted and either unwilling to be interrupted or to consider the situation too small to worry about and believe it is not worth provoking the angry foe again. These are the tactics planned by the exact calculation to exploit every human weakness, and it is almost mathematically sure to be successful unless the other side can learn to fight poison gas with poison gas. To those who are weak in nature, it can only be seen that it is a simple question of survival and non-survival. To me, the significance of physical terrorism toward the individual and toward the masses was plain to see. Terrorism on the job, in the factory, in the meeting hall, and at the mass demonstrations will always be successful unless equal terrorism opposes it. So, like, this is the point that you get to, like, when you want to survive. So essentially, he's saying, like, they are successful in creating the impression that giving in is the only way to win peace and quiet. Cautiously but unerringly conquer one position after another. CBS. to TikTok, just quietly, to Palantir getting into the government quietly, to ICE getting in the streets quietly, either by quiet extortion through the blackmail operations or by actual theft when the public attention is on other things. Look at us bombing Iran as they're carpet bombing Lebanon and stealing it, trying to steal it. So anyway, we'll stop there, but I just want to like say, like, is your mind blown? Like, it's the exact same tactics, and that's why I'm saying, like, they never wanted us to read this books because it's laying out the tactics that this group uses and used to destroy Germany. They didn't just destroy Iran in front of your eyes. They didn't just destroy Cuba in front of your eyes. They didn't destroy your life savings in front of your eyes. And it's never enough. So I just hope that just reading this very few pages, like, opens your eyes, because, like, you could keep going and going and going and going. Like, it's quite insane. And, like, I don't even mind, like, reading this together, and you don't have to agree with everything you read. Like, we're not in the 1930s Germany. We have evolved. We know more now. But you can appreciate what you are saying that is the same. And that is what Hitler was just telling you. He's like, you have to read everything, and you have to keep what resonates with your understanding and your critical thinking, so you can create narratives that you truly believe in and could recite. Unlike these puppets, who I think they all just have really good memories. They seriously just memorize a bunch of bullshit, and they're able to just, like, spew it, but it's all, like, illogical. So all right. Like, here we have millions of workers were inwardly hostile toward, and they called this the Social Democratic Party, kind of like how we have the Marxists in the Social Democratic Party. But these are just titles, and often they use deceptive titles to say something is something that it's not. So, but their resistance was overcome by often pointless and insane way in which the privileged class parties opposed any social demands. The inflexible refusal of reasonable demands, such as to improve working conditions, simple safety devices on machines, AI, prevention of child labor, protection for women, at least during the months of pregnancy. This has all helped to drive the masses into the nets of social democracy, which gratefully latch onto every case of similar contemptible sentiments. Our politicians, our privileged class, cannot rectify these past sins. By resisting all attempts to cure social ills, it sowed hatred and apparently justified the claim that the Social Democratic Party alone represented the interests of the working people. Above all, the privileged class furnished the more excuse for the existence of the unions, which have always been the greatest suppliers for the socialist political party. So I don't know, just some things to think about there. So, like, what have they really done to protect anybody from anything? They just squander everything. But they're extremely efficient at insider trading and passing bills for Israel, because those people give them money that they received from us.